Hey guys, it's Anthony here from 1301. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over debugging, so we're going to get you thinking about some problems that might show up in your code, and also how to test those problems, how to fix them, and how to find edge cases and test those too. So first I'm going to pull up a problem. Here's an example problem that we're going to use, username validator. So this is a previously given problem, and it works with iteration and strings. Basically, you're given a string, a username, and you should return a string. So the premise of this problem is we pass in a string to you, and there are three rules. You have to return a new username, but the username can only contain letters, numbers, periods, and hyphens. If there are any other special characters, replace it with a hyphen. The username can only contain up to 3 numbers, so any number after the third one shouldn't be included. And at least one letter must be capitalized in the username. If there are no capital letters, then capitalize the first letter. So you can also assume the first character of the username will always be a letter. And here are some test cases. If I test it on Stephanie 12-Sue 34, then when we print it out, you should see Stephanie capitalized 12-Sue 3, because the 4 should not be included. So we're going to jump into idle and test out some code. Awesome. So now we have a function that has already been written for username validator, and we're just going to see what happens when we run it. Okay, so here we can see that the first thing we run into is invalid syntax. So let's jump into our code and see where we can find it. So it seems to be on that line right there, if letter not equal to dot dash. Well, we know that this is a syntax error, so we're going to go ahead and change this to the not equal to sign. I'm going to save, and I'm going to run this again. Now feel free to try this problem on your own before we get started with debugging this, and let's see what your solution also outputs. So notice how our output differs from the expected output. It looks like we aren't capitalizing the letter in our username, as well as we're not accounting for the 3-numbered limit. We're also adding additional characters, so let's jump into our code and see what's going on. So our code, username validator, takes in a string, which is good. Because we want to return a new username, we should instantiate a variable in the beginning that starts off our new username, our empty string. We also have a boolean in a variable called capital, and this will check if our username had a capital letter or not. Then we're going to be looping through our string. Num equals 0. So this seems pretty important. Num equals 0 seems to be accounting for our number limit. But the problem here is this is inside of the loop, so after every iteration, num gets reset to 0. And so it's not actually storing how many numbers we currently have so far. Let's try moving this outside and see what happens. I'm going to save and then run this file again. Now I'm going to test the same test case. So I'll bring down this test case by clicking the line and then pressing enter. So that's better, but it looks like we're still missing some things. So it looks like we have the 3-number cap now, but we aren't capitalizing any letters still, and we're also still adding additional characters. Let's try to jump back into our code and see what happens. We're checking if the current letter we're looking at is a digit, and if num is less than 3. If it is, then we add 1 to our num count, and we'll add this letter to our new username. This case right here accounts for adding on the numbers while we still can. Then we can look at this next if statement. If letter dot is alpha, that checks if the letter is a letter and not a digit or some other special character. Then we check if letter is upper. So if the letter is uppercase, then capital is going to equal true, and this will be important later, because that means we have encountered a capital letter in our string and we don't have to capitalize the first letter ourselves. Then new username plus equals letter, so that seems right to me. Else, otherwise, if the letter does not equal dot dash, then new username plus equals dash. Is there something wrong here? Well, we want to replace any other special characters that aren't dot or dash with a dash. But will letter ever equal the string dot dash if letter is going to be one character in the string at a time? So this right here should actually be not in. Now let's test this again. I'm going to bring down the test cases just like usual, and we'll see that nothing has changed. So is there something else wrong with our code? Or we can jump back in. So if the letter is not part of dot or dash, then we're going to replace it with a hyphen. Otherwise, we're just going to tack it on. This addresses the dash and the period. So is there something else wrong with this? Let's go through and see what happens at each step of the way. So I want to see what letter I'm at when I enter this else block, because we know that we should only be entering this else block if the character we're looking at is not a digit and not a letter. So let's save and let's run it. So it looks like we're entering this else block when we see numbers and other characters. So let's see what's actually happening with our code. Well, when letter is a number, we could enter this. We won't enter this because this is only true if letter is a letter. But because that is not true, we always enter the else, right? Because this else is connected with this if, and these are not all connected. So let's see what we can change here. Let's try to make this whole thing one big if family, so that if we ever enter any of these branches, we won't enter any other ones. So I'm going to save, and I'm going to run that, and we can test it again. So now it looks like we're still entering the else block when we see that 4, and we shouldn't be. Let's try to fix this. This is only true if the letter is a digit and num is less than 3. This is only true if letter is a letter. Otherwise, we enter this else block. We should probably move this one in. Now, basically our outer if statements and our conditionals are addressing for all possible cases that letter can be. Either letter is going to be a digit, or letter is going to be a letter, or letter is going to be a special character. And now we can run this code again and see what happens. Good. So now it looks like we're only entering the else block when letter is a special character. So I'm going to remove this. I'm just going to save and run this again. So I'll bring this down, and then looks like we have almost the correct answer. So if we look at the correct output, it should be Stephanie 12-Sue 3. And it looks like we have everything except for the capitalized letter. So let's look at what's happening. Well, we have a Boolean value that's keeping track of if we've encountered any capitals. Capital equals false initially. When we jump into our code, if we see a letter that is uppercase, then capital equals true. Then, if capital new username equals new username 0.upper plus new username 1 through the end. So this line right here seems right. We replace the new username with the uppercase version of the first letter plus the rest of the username. But is this condition correct? Well, we only want to do this if we haven't seen any capital letters. So this should be if not capital. So we can save this, run it, and test it again. And now it looks like we have the correct answer. Awesome. So let's test another test case. And that looks correct to me. So let's start thinking about some edge cases here. What can a string be? Well, let's start thinking about those really picky corner cases. What if a string is an empty string? Then what would happen? So let's test this. Looks like our code errors. So let's see what's happening. It says we have a string index out of range error. And we know that it occurs on this line right here. Well, we know that if a string is empty, then we actually don't have any characters we can index into. So the error happens right here when we try to index the 0th position character. Well, we should account for this edge case initially. So we're going to say if a string equals the empty string, then we'll simply return nothing. So now let's try this. And it looks like it's correctly outputting what we want. So now let's try it with a different case. What if there's nothing to change? So Anthony 1, 2, 3. We can run it and we can see that nothing changes. So our code seems to be working fine. Let's get testing with a few more test cases. And it looks like it's capitalizing, it's replacing special characters that aren't allowed with hyphens, it's only keeping 3 numbers, and it meets all the rules. So it looks like our code works for all test cases. So now this should be good to submit. And I hope this kind of gives you a glimpse into how we debug our code. We test with a bunch of different test cases and we see what can go wrong. And then as we see errors pop up, we jump into our code, dive in and see our logic, right? All of our blocks, all of our conditions, maybe how we design our loop, and we see what may be going wrong. We can put print statements around different conditionals or through different iterations to kind of print out and see what's happening at each step of the way. And then if we run into any more problems, we just go back and try to fix up our code even more. And then at the very end, to ensure that we're fully complete and our code is totally safe, we can run this and test it with a bunch of different corner cases and edge cases. Notice how I'm testing with more cases than what are provided in the PDF. We recommend that you do this so that you kind of get a feel for testing your own code, and then it should be good to submit. So thank you guys for watching, and please check out our other YouTube videos as well. I think they're super helpful. See you guys!